statements of Bungoma County Disaster and Emergency Fund for the year ended 30th June 2020. 36, report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Trans Nzoia County Nawiri Fund for the year ended 30th June 2020. 37, report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Trans Nzoia County Elimu Bursary Fund for the year ended 30th June 2020. 38, report of the Auditor General on the financial statement of Kitale Municipality for the year ended 30th June 2020. 39, report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Embu County Water and Sanitation Company Limited for the year ended 30th June 2020. 40, report of the Auditor General on the financial statements of Embu Water and Sanitation Company Limited for the year ended 30th June 2020. Mr. Speaker, I beg to lay.
Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Majority Leader. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to
Read
give
them together.
I beg to give notice of the following motions, Mr. Speaker. Number 1, that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order 27.6, that the thanks of the Senate be recorded for the exposition of public policy contained in the address of the President during the opening of the 13th Parliament, delivered on Thursday, the 29th of September, 2022. 2, Mr. Speaker, approval of Senate calendar for the first session of the 13th Parliament, that pursuant to Standing Order number 32.1, that the Senate approves its calendar, regular sessions, for the first session of the 13th Parliament, September to December 2022, be laid on the table of the House on Wednesday, 5th October 2022. Thank you.
Next order.
Order number 7, statements. Order number 8, procedural motion, limitation of debate on motions.
It seems today the Majority Leader, you have quite a bit to do. Proceed to move the procedural motion.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that, pursuant to Standing Order 111.1, that the Senate resolves that debate on a motion not sponsored by a majority or minority party or a committee shall be limited in the following manner. A maximum of 3 hours with not more than 20 minutes for the mover, 20 minutes for the majority party official responder, 20 minutes for the minority party official responder, and 15 minutes for each of the other senator speaking, and that 15 minutes before the time expires, the mover shall be called upon to reply. Mr. Speaker, this is a procedural motion. I know maybe just by way of mention, at the beginning of a term of new parliament, just like right now, we do many of such motions so that we lay the ground rules on what to follow procedure each time there's similar motions such as the one that I have just read before the House, Mr. Speaker. It's a fairly straightforward matter. I don't expect a contest like we had yesterday. In fact, the challenge to Senator Faki is that since as part of this induction process, Mr. Speaker, we showed our new colleagues how protracted debate can be on this House. Let us show them also how peaceful and amicable we can coexist sometimes today in the course of our business, Mr. Speaker. This being a straightforward matter, Mr. Speaker, and we have many such, I think about 2 that we expect to do today on limitation of time, basically ensuring that when there is a motion that has been sponsored, how much time can an individual take? Limitations of time for majority leader, minority leader, the mover, the responder. So it's important that our colleagues get to acquaint themselves with these rules. It's displayed on our tablets. If you want to keep record and know for how many minutes you can speak on a particular matter, the same has been availed on the tablets that are before each senator, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I don't want to take long. Mr. Speaker, I beg that my colleague, the leader of minority, to second.
The leader of minority.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a procedural motion. Mr. Speaker, I second.
Thank you. Honorable Senators, I propose the question that pursuant to Standing Order 111.1, the Senate resolves that debate on a motion not sponsored by the majority or minority party or a committee shall be limited in the following manner. A maximum of 3 hours with not more than 20 minutes for the mover, 20 minutes for the majority party official responder, 20 minutes for the minority party official responder, and 15 minutes for each other senator speaking, and that 15 minutes before the time expires, the mover shall be called upon to reply. Is that the mood? If that is the direction you are taking, then, Honorable Senators, I put the question that pursuant to Standing Order 111.1, the Senate resolves that debate on a motion not sponsored by the majority or minority party or a committee shall be limited in the following manner. A maximum of 3 hours with not more than 20 minutes for the mover, 20 minutes for the majority party official responder, 20 minutes for the minority party official responder, and 15 minutes for each other senator speaking, and that 15 minutes before the time expires, the mover shall be called upon to reply. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? Then the ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 9, procedural motion, limitation of debate on adjournment motion.
Majority leader.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that notwithstanding the provisions of Standing Order number 110.4, that debate on any motion for the adjournment of the Senate to a day other than the next normal sitting day in accordance with the calendar of the Senate shall be limited to a maximum of 2 hours with not more than 15 minutes for each senator speaking, after which the Senate shall proceed to adjourn without question put, provided that when the period of recess proposed by any such motion does not exceed 90 calendar days, the debate shall be limited to a maximum of 30 minutes and shall be confined to the question of adjournment. This is a very important one, Mr. Speaker. You know, the reason why we set out this one, complete with the rules, is that one time, Mr. Speaker, when we had difficult times in this House, somebody moved an adjournment motion, and they didn't have a specific number of days for which they wanted the House to adjourn. Therefore, they abused the notice and the notice of motion. They abused, actually, the provisions of the standing order, Mr. Speaker, and the House almost went on a long recess while it was in the middle of a very busy time for Parliament. Especially, I think actually it must have been around the budget time between February and April. Therefore, I like the provisions of the standing order that expressly provides for how long this recess that is achieved through this motion, which is separate from the normally provided recess in our Senate calendar, Mr. Speaker, can be, that it can only be a maximum of 3 months. I don't foresee any such situation. This is the beginning of a new session of Parliament. People are anxious. They want to present bills before this House. I don't foresee any of this happening. But like I said in the previous motion, Mr. Speaker, it is important that we lay the ground rules. These are the rules that will guide us for the next 5 years. Therefore, as colleague senators, it's important that before giving your aye of approval or your nay of denial for any motions, that you are doing as a procedure motion, please read and understand, first of all, what you are signing up to. This is actually akin to the signing of a contract. I'd further wish to request something before I resume my seat, Mr. Speaker. I know in the normal traditions and nature of the House that we normally don't debate motions of procedure. But we have said, just like you allowed graciously when you are welcoming the pupils that are before Parliament, Mr. Speaker, 2 or 3 people to still have a chance to speak on it, despite it being a procedural motion, it's important that we allow and acquaint our colleagues who are still learning the curves and the ways of doing procedures of this House. Let them have a chance to speak. Parliament is a place for people speaking. I am not a fan of this business of the mood of the House is that we pass. Why? We came here to speak, debate, raise something, whatever is the mood. So, Mr. Speaker, because I want to, I can see my colleague Senator Wambua is probably not being handled very well by the moods or the situation that he finds himself in this afternoon. I want to grant him the opportunity to second this motion, perhaps say the many things that he was saying earlier to you. You remember earlier when you gave him a chance to speak, Mr. Speaker, instead of welcoming visitors, he went on a long rant about why you need to observe standing orders and be firm. I can see now that he has brightened up a bit, Mr. Speaker, and he will do a good job. So I want to request my good friend, the pastor from Kitui, Senator Enoch Wambua, to second this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, Senator Wambua. Then Deputy Majority Leader.
Majority, okay.
Or Minority Leader, sorry. Minority Leader. You wish, eh? I will withdraw Minority Leader.
I thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the onset, I want to second the procedural motion on a limitation of time. And Mr. Speaker, just hasten to say that there's a reason why we would have limitation of time on debates, on motions, on bills, and on every matter that comes to the floor of this House. Because, Mr. Speaker, I think this comes from a tradition before this principle of limitation was introduced, where members would speak on one issue for 3 hours. At times, the intentions are not even pure, but now that we have limitation, then it also guides us and it makes us be able to efficiently use the time of the Senate. So, Mr. Speaker, I support, and as I support, you know, the majority leader is a ranking member in this House, and he does a lot of good things in this House, apart from just bringing the business of the state, of the government, to the floor of the Senate. As Speaker, I have a strong feeling that when you looked at those names of those brilliant students that have been nominated for internship in Parliament, you know, this time round there is serious observation of gender issues, you know, and that I can tell you for sure, Mr. Speaker, knowing Senator Cheruiyot and his passion for gender issues, he must have had a hand in making sure that we have more ladies than men in this internship. The Speaker, I second and I congratulate the PSC, outgoing PSC representative of the Senate, for doing a good job in this election. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I propose the question that, notwithstanding the provisions of Standing Order 110.4, the debate on any motion for the adjournment of the Senate to one day other than the next normal sitting day in accordance with the calendar of the Senate shall be limited to a maximum of 2 hours with not more than 15 minutes for each senator speaking, after which the Senate shall adjourn without question put. Provided that when the period of recess proposed by any such motion has not exceeded 9 calendar days, the debate shall be limited to a maximum of 30 minutes and shall be confined to the question of adjournment. I can see from my list a few members. I don't know whether they want to contribute to this motion, procedural motion. Okay. Senator Medu? Okay, wait, Senator Medu, just a minute. Senator for Nairobi County.
Mr. Speaker, I'm a bit
My senator when I'm in Nairobi, okay, proceed.
Yes, Karibu Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. Reading from the motion on the order paper, it makes reference to Standing Order 110.4. My copy of the standing orders has 111.4 as the order dealing with the limitation of... do I have the wrong document? Okay. And it also talks about 9 calendar days, and I had the majority leader refer to 90 days. That's a clarification. That's a clarification I was seeking. Thank you, Speaker.
That's correct, and maybe 9 calendar days. For the answer and purposes, majority, can you collect that 9 with...
Mr. Speaker, I meant 9 days. If I said 90, the correct number is 9, not 90. Calendar days.
Thank you. Senator Medu?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And from the onset, you have to bear with the leader of majority, Senator for Kericho. 9 and 90 are, close to each other. Their tongue can spell 9 and 90 almost synonymously, but then we just have to, that is where it comes from. Now, Mr. Speaker, as I rise to support the procedural motion, as has been brought by the leader of majority, I think there is something that I've looked and liked from the proposal, and I'm finding 15 minutes for a senator enough to prosecute their case, that I'll be able to prosecute my case and that of the people of Jadala that I'm representing in here. Our colleagues from the lower house, the National Assembly, have only 5 minutes to contribute. So 15 minutes is sufficient for all of us, and the 20 minutes that have been proposed. So, Mr. Speaker, as I support this motion, I would wish to say that from my experience, the time that we've gotten to speak here, we only get about 3, 4, 5 minutes, and we are able to prosecute our cases. So 15 minutes is enough to have us, move forward. So I thank you very much, and I support.
Okay, let me give one more senator from this end, senator nominated, Tsengo Kaluda Beth. Because I can see you have requested to contribute. And if you have nothing, do you want to continue? That's your wish? I don't want to ambush you,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think what has been said is sufficient enough. The only thing I can add is what Senator Methu said, 9 and 90. Those are 2 different words. Thank you.
Okay, honorable senators, I put the question that notwithstanding the provisions of Standing Order 110.4, the debate on any motion for the adjournment of the Senate to a day other than the next normal sitting day in accordance with the calendar of the Senate shall be limited to a maximum of 2 hours with not more than 15 minutes for each senator speaking, after which the debate shall adjourn without question put. Provided that when the period of recess proposed by any such motion does not exceed 9 calendar days, the debate shall be limited to a maximum of 30 minutes and shall be confined to the question of adjournment. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 10, procedural motion. Limitation of debate on motion on the address by the President.
Senate Majority Leader. Deputy Senate Majority Leader.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that pursuant to Standing Order 27-6, the Senate resolves that the debate on the motion on the presidential address shall be limited to a maximum of 3 sitting days, with not more than 15 minutes for each senator speaking, excluding the mover in moving and replying, who shall be limited to 30 minutes in either case, and that the senator majority leader and the Senate minority leader shall be limited to 30 minutes each. I request Senator Fatuma Ndulu to second.
Senator Fatuma Ndulu.
Mr. Speaker, I second.
Thank you.
Honorable Senators, I propose the question that pursuant to Standing Order 27-6, the Senate resolves that the debate on the motion on the presidential address shall be limited to a maximum of 3 sitting days, with not more than 15 minutes for each senator speaking, excluding the mover in moving and replying, who shall be limited to 30 minutes in either case, and that the Senate majority leader and the Senate minority leader shall be limited to 30 minutes each. Okay, thank you. Honorable Senators, I put the question that pursuant to Standing Order 27-6, the Senate resolves that the debate on the motion of the presidential address shall be limited to a maximum of 3 sitting days, with not more than 15 minutes for each senator speaking, excluding the mover in moving and replying, which shall be limited to 30 minutes in either case, and that the Senate majority leader and the Senate minority leader shall be limited to 30 minutes each. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Next order.
Order number 11, motion. Debate on the address by His Excellency the President during the opening of the 13th Parliament, first day.
Majority Leader and member for Kericho County, Senator Harun Chiruyoti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that pursuant to the provisions of Standing Order number 27-6, the thanks of the Senate be recorded for the exposition of the public policy contained in the address of the President during the opening of the 13th Parliament delivered on Thursday, the 29th of September, 2022, be hereby recorded, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this was a very important day. Many of us were happy about it because we had been assured that we will never see such a day. But who is God in heaven? You know, when we left this chamber, Mr. Speaker, a few days to the general election. In fact, many of us had come here to transact. I can't remember what the exact business was. I think, it was a motion actually for the House to formally adjourn for that synod. And you remember how my colleagues on the minority side on that particular day were excited, exuberant, sure that they had the system. We promised them that we had the people and God. The fact that we are here today referring to this particular speech and moved on that particular day has reminded all of us that elections are like a sine wave. You never know when it will toss you up. You never know when it will toss you down. But as we were so well reminded on that particular day, Mr. Speaker, elections are firmly behind us. It is now time to close ranks. We have a very serious agenda before us. We have a country, as a leadership of this House, Mr. Speaker, as a leadership actually rather of the country, Kenyans are looking up to us to solve many, many, many issues that continue to bedevil them. Mr. Speaker, as many of our colleagues will come to learn, perhaps those who are joining in Parliament for the very first time, is that this issue of majority, minority, opposition, government, only exists in our minds as leaders. On many occasions, if you are gathered even in social gatherings, and people continue, members of a family or friends, they ask you questions about the things that bother them as a country, and they look at you as a leader. They, in most cases, will not be so much bothered about which side of the political divide you come from. They look up to you to provide direction, to provide leadership, and they excuse that, oh, you know, we are not in government, or the other reason, it is the executive, it's not us in the legislature that are supposed to do this or that, rarely holds true in such discussions, Mr. Speaker. On many occasions, they'll demand that because we have been granted the opportunity by the people of Kenya, our constituents, the people that gave us a chance and the platform to be in this House, to speak, represent them, legislate, oversight the executive, and ensure that we leave a country that is better than we found it when we first came to this House, Mr. Speaker. It was on that account, Mr. Speaker, that the President, His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto, came before the House, Mr. Speaker, a joint sitting of both Houses of Parliament, and laid his agenda, an initial one, of what he intends to do for the country and what he considers to be important for us as legislators. Remember, in a democracy such as ours, Mr. Speaker, on many occasions, we'll find that even a popularly elected president, without the support of the legislature, will find themselves in a very difficult place, and you're not actually likely to deliver unless you have the thumb of approval from the legislature. Actually, Mr. Speaker, if the legislature, and perhaps more than even the judiciary on many occasions, because for the judiciary, unless somebody files a petition or complaint about things that the executive is doing, they are innocent bystanders to what the executive is doing. But we as parliamentarians, we have the singular honor of interrogating every business that the executive busies themselves with, from the day that we joined this particular House, Mr. Speaker, up to the last day. And on many occasions, many colleagues perhaps right now are yet to realize that actually when proper work begins, Mr. Speaker, and you find statements being laid before this House with requests for exposure, or even members of the public raising issues via petitions, that all of us in this House will speak with one voice. We will demand from the executive that they do that which they promise. The fact that we sit on the left or the right of the House, Mr. Speaker, is a very small matter, Mr. Speaker. We know very well that what ranks atop the work of a legislature is to, of a legislator, Mr. Speaker, is to represent your people and ensure that any time there are challenges, and there will be many challenges across as we move on this journey of leadership, Mr. Speaker, that we demand the best from our people, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the President laid a speech. I'll give a few highlights, Mr. Speaker, of the things that I considered or struck me out of his presentation before the joint sitting of the Houses, Mr. Speaker, and raise my thoughts on the same. I expect that colleague senators also will take time to read, understand what the President was saying, and speak about it, because we are duty-bound and we have it in our standing orders. The last motion that we just passed, Mr. Speaker, gives each senator at least 15 minutes to give your reaction to whatever was said, whether you agree with him, you completely disagree with him. The same is contained in this speech, and I have seen hard copies of the same being circulated, and soft copies are the tablets that are before each and every member of this House, Mr. Speaker. And this is very important. Of course, in his beginning, Mr. Speaker, he noted that for the first time, this is a parliament that has had as many as 193 members of the National Assembly, and I think 17 senators re-elected back to this House. That has not happened, Mr. Speaker, under the new constitution before. We have such a high attrition rate as members of parliament, Mr. Speaker, that it was getting actually to a place where being a member of parliament in Kenya was about to be added to the list of 1,000 quickest way to die. Because you know what happens when you're a member of parliament, yet after every 5 years, when you have to face the electorate, if your chances of survival are only 20 or 30%, then this is not the kind of job that many people will have picked. But with this kind, 17 out of 47 works up to slightly close to 30%, Mr. Speaker. It's an improvement, Mr. Speaker, and I hope in the coming days, actually, because when you follow, if you're a keen follower of many legislatures, Mr. Speaker, especially those that are bicameral in nature, like the one we have in our country, the upper house, that is the Senate, is actually a house that retains the best that it has to offer in terms of leadership. On many occasions, actually, is a holding place before people proceed on either to presidency or higher level other than the work of a legislator. And the fact that many of our colleagues were voted back, Mr. Speaker, 17, is good testament that the country is beginning to appreciate. For those that faced the election, especially the 2017 election, Mr. Speaker, there was a huge debate in the country. What is the work of a senator? You know, on many occasions, you had to defend yourself because this whole Senate business was new to the Kenyan voter. And they were wondering. Many occasions, Mr. Speaker, you know, many of us would go to functions in the first Senate under this current constitution. And you have the governor there, they'll arise to speak and mention, you know, I brought this and that development to this particular area. Then the member of the National Assembly will arise and say, good people of this village, you know, this classroom was built by myself. Then finally they say, oh, good people, let us also now welcome our senator to say something. And there you'd be speaking about oversight, which was completely strange. What is this animal called oversight? And on many occasions, to the ordinary voter, they consider senators to be joyriders or idlers who go to Nairobi to disappear and come back after 5 years to be given another chance. That seemed to be waning off in the minds of Kenyan voters. They are beginning to appreciate the place of the Senate, and I appreciate that, and that can be seen in the number of senators that were re-elected back. I want to believe, Mr. Speaker, that as a House, if we pull together, if we execute as per our constitutional mandate, hold governors to account, hold the executive to account, ensure that we devolve as much as possible of the national resources to our counties and partner with our county assemblies so that people can begin to enjoy even more the fruits of devolution, then as many, it is possible even to have more than 50% of those of us that will seek the office of a senator elected back to this House. So therefore, it was just a good celebration. Of course, Mr. Speaker, as has been mentioned earlier, you know very well that the President is a champion actually for the gender inclusion in leadership. And this has been noted in his speech as well, that as an improvement, in 2017, the 12th Parliament, Mr. Speaker, we had only 23 women elected into single constituencies. The National Assembly now has 29 women elected into single constituencies. That's a good improvement. It's unfortunate that as a Senate, we did not increase actually or have a growth in terms of the number of women senators that were elected. We had 3 last term, we have 3 this term as well. I wish that as we continue to place Senate in its rightful place, we can convince Kenyans to vote in as many women to be senators actually. Do we have 4? I'm being reminded that we have 4. Oh, we had 4 last time. Actually, yeah, when we added Senator Agnes Kavindu, we actually had 4. So it's a downgrade actually, and something to be worried about as senators, because now we have 3 only, Mr. Speaker. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the President moved on to remind us about our duty as members of Parliament, where the nexus is drawn between us and the agenda that he has for the people. Of course, there was a moment of celebration, Mr. Speaker, because unlike in the past, and I agree with him, Mr. Speaker, that there was a paradigm shift in this election. And many of our colleagues actually were elected on the basis of a promise that they gave to the electorate more than just being party loyalists to a particular. The decoration that you see, I think in terms of as many parties as possible. We have senators elected on independent. We have a senator like Okiya Mtata elected on an unaligned political party that's not aligned to any of the major coalition. And even in the two sides of the House, Mr. Speaker, you have senators elected on different political parties. This points to the maturity that the Kenyan voter continues to show in every election. The fact that for a long time, we have always yearned and said, is it possible to have an issue-based political contest such that at the end of the electoral process, you are able to point out to the country and say who won, which ideological divide sold and gave out or resonated mostly with the voters and the people of Kenya to a point that they were able to agree with them and grant them leadership of a country, Mr. Speaker. That is celebrated, noted, and it's something that we need to be proud of and perhaps even grow it, Mr. Speaker, something that we need to grow, because I believe that for those who have been in the political circles longer than myself, there are many people here who've been in this field longer. They know that when this journey began, Kenya began actually from a single-party state. And for a long time, of course, through the journey of multi-party, ensuring that people are voted in now in as many parties as possible, to now going to the next step that even amongst us, you can be within a similar political party, but represent a particular ideology, represent a particular thinking that may not necessarily agree to the general view or what is common thinking amongst the people that you campaign with, and people listen to you and grant the opportunity to lead. That is something that was tested and proved during this particular election, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the President also gave us his commitment and read out something that is quite assuring. It's not every day that you hear President speak the words and give the commitment that they commit to be loyal, hardworking, devoted, President of every Kenyan. This has been a testament. You have seen actually, Mr. Speaker, that in his visits, Mr. Speaker, the President has actually on 2 or 3 occasions visited regions that did not necessarily give him the sign of approval, that they never voted for him. But as part of spreading his message and ensuring that we build together, close rank, have the political divides that existed before the election firmly behind us, and speaking and engaging Kenyans. It's assuring to hear a president, it's not an everyday occurrence, say that I will be president for us. Of course, the challenge now to us as members of parliament, as the legislature, is to hold him to account so that we ensure that on every government program that is given, we don't want it to see it skewed towards any particular region so that there are people who feel as if they are less Kenyans than others. This is something that we shall hold the president to account, but at least I celebrate him. You know, it begins by first voicing it, admitting that there are people who may not necessarily have voted for you and don't see you as their president, but saying, nonetheless, regardless of that particular situation, I'll still ensure that as I undertake my duties, as I execute my programs, as I run my development agenda, every Kenyan will feel part and parcel of this particular country, and none will feel that they are left out. That's something worth applauding, Mr. Speaker. Of course, then he moved on to lay the legislative agenda, Mr. Speaker, in this particular House, knowing that we have the long-standing issue between us and the National Assembly on which bills are supposed to come to the Senate, which ones can be prosecuted by the National Assembly without particular reference to this particular House. I listened to him. I've had occasion to privately also, Mr. Speaker, hear him commit and say that this protracted battle that has existed for the last 2 sessions of Parliament is not helpful to us as a country, that we need to lay this matter to rest, even as we await either the Supreme Court to make a determination or even for members of the National Assembly to listen to the good reason of the senators. There's nothing that having a second eye, that is a different house from the house that laid out a particular bill, speak to it, add their voice, make it better, make particular changes. There is nothing wrong with that being done to the new calendar year. We know very well what is the place of Senate, what is the place of National Assembly, and we can focus on that which matter for the ordinary citizen, Mr. Speaker. The ordinary citizen isn't bothered about which is the upper house, which is the lower house, who is supposed to consider the budget issues. What they want to see are tangible results, their lives being better. their vote counting, their vote having a meaningful proposition to them waking up early and giving us the chance to lead them, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, it's something quite worth considering, Mr. Speaker. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, the President did request something quite important also. Paragraph 16 of his speech, that through our standing orders, if we can consider allowing cabinet secretaries to actually explain government policy and answer questions on the floor of our House. Mr. Speaker, if there will be a bigger beneficiary to this policy, and senators who have been in this House previously will know that this will be quite important to us, is that in the course of time, you will realize that on many occasions, when a cabinet secretary has been invited before the National Assembly and the Senate, Senator Moses Kajwang will tell you where they are most likely to go and why. Therefore, if this is included and we succeed to convince both houses, and I don't see a reason why we cannot do this, it will be important to face our colleagues in cabinet and have them appear before this House. We set time for them, either a morning or an afternoon, and you ask them issues about your constituency, things that are dear to your constituents, other than just being in an enclosed session of a committee. On many occasions, you know how much we have struggled. In fact, towards the end of the last term of Senate, I can count on one hand how many ministers used to honor summons to this particular House of the Senators. Therefore, if there will be a beneficiary actually to this particular policy shift, should we agree with the request of the President, it will be the Senate, Mr. Speaker, so that we get a chance to interrogate these ministers. Let them come and stand where I'm standing, so that members can question them, members can demand of them answers, and members can have the opportunity actually to raise and have a personal touch and personal connection with each and every minister, because it's not specified. I think the olive branch that was being extended was not to, there's no debate about only the ministers that have got functions that are devolved functions or any kind of debate, anything of that matter, Mr. Speaker. This is extremely important, and I look forward to us as a leadership, when we get the opportunity to review this, to agree with him, so that we, as soon as cabinet is in place, they can come to this House and respond to all our questions, explain policy. We challenge them on some of the things that we don't agree with, because I do not believe for a fact that it is possible to run a country where for every policy decision that the government takes, despite, I don't mind being informed by my neighbor, a senator for Nyamira, Mr. Speaker. In any case, if he wrongly informs me, I'll block his way home to Nyamira. So.
Okay, he has accepted that information. Kindly inform him.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity to inform the Honorable Leader of Majority, my neighbor from the county of Kericho. Mr. Speaker, the member is creating the impression that the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya has not created an enabling constitutional framework for cabinet secretaries to appear before the House and respond to all the queries that this House may wish them to clarify. But I wanted to inform the majority leader that that issue is adequately addressed by the provisions of Article 153, sub-Article 3. Mr. Speaker, if you may permit me, Article 153 states that a cabinet secretary shall, the word used is shall, attend before a committee of the Senate when required by the committee and answer any question concerning a matter for which the cabinet secretary is responsible. So I wanted to inform the member. Sorry. Mr. Speaker, I have permission of the majority leader that I inform you. That's how business runs here, Senator for Bomet, nominated senator. So, my neighbor, I wanted to inform you that even without amending the standing orders, the Constitution already has a very clear framework for CSS to appear before us. Mr. Speaker, what I should be hearing from the majority leader is that the president should tell his incoming CSS to respect the Senate. And anytime we summon them to appear before us, they appear before us. So the issue is discipline of CSS, not inadequacy of the provisions in the Constitution to enable us summon the CSS.
Senator nominated Joyce Kolil. Why interrupting the Honorable Senator for Nyamira? You know the senator was being informed is the majority leader, and he has not actually complained that he has not been informed. He is very comfortable that he has been informed, and yeah, so nobody should. Okay, proceed, majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I only allowed Senator Omogeni because one is my neighbor, and two lawyers refer to him as senior counsel. But little did I know that senior counsel can misinform as well, because I'm afraid what he gave me was misinformation, not information. If he bothers to read the speech of the president, there is no impression whatsoever that the president actually suggests in any way that members of his cabinet will not honor or respect this house. But read paragraph 16 of his speech on what is a proposition and what value. Senator Omogeni, you have been in this house, and you know very well what value we draw every time we have had what ordinarily, because this is akin to a committee of the whole, where we have all of us as senators.
Majority leader, there are two interventions here. One actually has been here for quite some time from the distinguished senator for Kisumu County. Are you on intervention or you want to contribute? Then the second one is Honorable Bone Karole, the majority whip. Yes, proceed.
Mr. Speaker, the principle of a member being responsible for the accuracy of his statement in this House is a cardinal principle.
What is standing order? Are you
point of order.
Which
I'm on the point of order as a result of the utterances by Senator Omogeni. Mr. Speaker, if I may, number two, it is important that the records of this House record nothing but facts. Mr. Speaker, if Omogeni, who is a senior counsel, can fail to read and understand the provisions of the Constitution, then what are we saying about the teaching of law at the University of Nairobi? Mr. Speaker, Article 153. Mr. Speaker, Article 153. Mr. Speaker, Article 153 of the Constitution speaks through the mandatory.
You know, is on a point of order. Let him clear his
you'll
point
respond.
of order. Then I'll give you time to respond to that allegation, because you know they are pupils. Our students are in pupillage, and you must really clear that here completely.
Yes. Mr. Speaker,
maybe 30 seconds, please.
Mr. Speaker, it's a very important issue. The senior counsel has read to us, and we thank him, Article 153. 3. It says mandatory, the cabinet secretary shall attend committees. Committees. Mr. Speaker, our understanding is that both the President and Senator Jeriot are addressing the lacuna where cabinet secretaries are not able to face the whole House. Mr. Speaker, I'm standing on a point of order that the honorable member be asked to retract his statement because it is not based on fact. And two, Mr. Speaker, he apologizes to Kenyans and the Law Society of Kenya for his inability to read and understand the Constitution of Kenya.
Senator Tom Ojenda, just 2 minutes to clear that issue?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I have known a senator for Kakamega, Senator Kalwale, as a fairly experienced senator. But I'm surprised, Mr. Speaker, that the senator does not seem to understand that even a Senate sitting can sit as a whole committee of the House. That's a basic principle that is there in our Constitution, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing out of order on the Article 1, I've read to this House, that's Article 153, Mr. Speaker. And that article, Mr. Speaker, is broad, is liberal, it gives leeway to this House to summon a cabinet secretary to appear before the House and answer any question which the cabinet secretary is responsible. And the point I was trying to bring to the floor of the House is that that article is adequate. It gives power to this House to summon any CS to appear before the House and respond to any issue. Honorable Kalwale, even if you interpret this article and read it in Kiswahili, you will understand that those powers are there. What has been the problem is failure by cabinet secretaries responding to summons wherever issued by the Senate. And Senator Cheruiyot, our majority leader, will tell you that in the last session, we issued several invitations, several summons to CSS, but they never appeared before the floor of this House. That's why I was informing the Honorable Senator of Kericho, majority leader, that what he should be telling, please, I'm informing the member. Now, Mr. Speaker, in good faith and with good intentions, I wanted Senator Cheruiyot, leader of majority, to whisper to His Excellency the President to preach good manners to his CSS, so that when we summon them, they respond and appear. The Constitution is very clear. Article 125 is very clear. We sit as a high court. We have power to summon. That's adequate. We don't need to be lectured that we need to amend our standing orders, Mr. Speaker. The Constitution is adequate. I want to hope that the CSs that are coming in, the 22 men and women, will respect the Senate and that they will respond wherever required to respond to any query by this House. So, Honorable Kalwale.
Thank you, Senator.
Honorable Kalwale.
Kongo Mugeni.
Honorable Kalwale.
Before you resume, I want to guide this House in this manner.
There's one point, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, the member is breaching our standing orders by imputing wrong motive that as a senior counsel I've misread Article 153 of the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I've not added a comma nor a full stop to the provisions of Article 153.3. I've read it the way it is, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, the member is out of order for imputing wrong motive on my person, Mr. Speaker. He should apologize.
I want to give guidance to this House as follows. If you want to have a point of order executed, don't shout this point of order. Press the intervention key and keep quiet. I have now 7 honorable senators who want to speak on this issue, who want to contribute on this issue, but most of them are not even talking. So I want to guide you that if you just raise your hand, you shout, you stand up, I will not be able to catch your eye. I will only be looking at the intervention key so that we can have order in this House. I want to give 2 more senators this point of order. I will start with the number 1 on this list, Senator for Homa Bay County, Kajwang Moses Otieno. And thank you did not even bother to shout or to, yeah, that is the way I want us to move.
Mr. Speaker, I want to encourage the House that we don't have to fight on every matter. I know the first 2 sittings of this House have been a bit tumultuous, but there are some things which we must take a common position as a House. And Mr. Speaker, I refer to Standing Order number 181 that talks about the Committee of the Whole to anchor my point of order. I also bring my experience. In the last Parliament, or in the last Senate, I'm perhaps the only senator who was fortunate to chair two committees, Public Accounts Committee and the Devolution Committee. And Mr. Speaker, the impunity that was there in the executive, as a chair of a committee, you could never get the ministers or the cabinet secretaries to appear before committees. And that impunity was further entrenched by the leadership of the House that shielded the cabinet secretaries. Mr. Speaker, you would find people going on retreat between the Matiang'i-led NDIC, I think it was called NDIC, and the leadership of the Senate, and they would agree in hotels. You'd find a situation where a committee has summoned a cabinet secretary, and the cabinet secretary goes to the Speaker's office to negotiate whether they should appear or they should not. Mr. Speaker, this matter, as raised by Senator Omogeni, is so clear in the Constitution, and the matter raised by Senator for Kakamega, when that mess is lowered, we can go into committee of the whole, and a member of the executive can come to this House and can be grilled and can be put to task. The only thing we cannot do without a constitutional amendment is to bring members of the executive in this House when that mess is on the table. Mr. Speaker, that requires a constitutional amendment. But what the president wants to achieve is achievable if he talks to his CSs to desist from impunity. And what encourages me, Mr. Speaker, Kipchumba Murkomen, as sat in this House, will be a cabinet secretary. I don't expect we'll have to drag him. Soipan Tuya, Kindiki Kithure, Mithika Linturi. I think we might be having one of the best, executive teams. So, Mr. Speaker, on this matter, we don't even have to be majority and minority. The provisions are there. What we need to deal with is the impunity that we saw in the last.
The Senator for Kiambu County, Karungo Lango.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to weigh in on the point of orders that have been raised. And I totally agree with Senator Omogeni and Senator Kajwang. It is true, the previous executive was full of impunity. And I want to assure them, we took them home. That executive that never honored the Senate, none of them is in those positions. So they should rest assured that we have a different government, we have a different executive, and actually it is the same executive that is proposing that the CSs to be coming to this House. So it's up to us. If we want them to come to the Senate, we know what to do. If we do not want them to come, it's okay. But the president himself said he is willing, and he has instructed his appointees that whenever they are called to this House, they should appear here without fail. So I'm worried to see the same opposition that was supporting the same government or the executive, they are now crying for, saying that they you honored this House. Yet they wanted them to come back here. But at least we clean the House, we clean the country, we clean the government. Thank you.
Thank you, Majority Leader. And I beg the House that let the Majority Leader move this motion to the end uninterrupted so that we get the second and then we open this motion for debate.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll try and make progress. You know, Senator Omogeni has sent me to the President, but before I deliver his message, I must first get an undertaking from him that he will read paragraph 16 of the President's speech, because if he did that, then he will not need to send me to the President. The President gave his commitment on the last matter that on this matter of oversight and holding government accountable, my administration commits to restore the place of Parliament in our democracy by respecting the autonomy and oversight authority of Parliament on the executive. If that is done, Mr. Speaker, then we don't need to have the kind of debate that you're having. So I appreciate that he needs to read and understand that particular. Mr. Speaker, another very important issue highlighted in this particular speech, just alongside the theme of independent institution, Mr. Speaker, is a place of the judiciary. And you remember, Mr. Speaker, the President reported to the House that his first act, you know, there is significance in a first act, Mr. Speaker. When you undertake a first act, when you get to an office, when you have an opportunity to be somewhere, the first thing that you do is quite remarkable, both in African culture and in general practice across the globe, Mr. Speaker. And you remember that the first act, public function, that the President undertook, which he reported to the House, was to appoint and swear in the 6 judges of the Court of Appeal that had been condemned by the previous administration for reasons that nobody ever knew. This was quite shameful because you have judges of the High Court who are presiding over courts, yet people were questioning their characters, because you remember, in typical fashion, as was the standard of practice in this country, Mr. Speaker, that people were being accused by the former occupant of the Office of the Director of Criminal Investigation in newspapers, including men and women of our judiciary. Unlike us, at least us as a politician, if Kinoti accused me, I'd have a public platform for which to respond. When you accuse members of a judiciary, they have no other avenue. And it was a very trying time for these 6 particular judges, that on many occasions, Mr. Speaker, many people questioned what was the basis upon which the President had rejected their elevation to the Court of Appeal. He swore them in and reported to the House that he had already done it, and that is how he intends to operate, that we ensure that as a constitutional democracy, we respect the sovereign doctrine of separation of powers, that we ensure that the judiciary has its place. If you read the next paragraph of his speech, commits even additional funding. It's a shame, Mr. Speaker, that the National Assembly in the last few years, Mr. Speaker, has grown the budget of almost all key public institutions, from Parliament itself to the executive, yet the judiciary continues to receive a paltry 14 to 18 billion Kenya shillings. The President has made a commitment that in each of the next 5 years, progressively, the judiciary shall get an additional at least 3 billion Kenya shillings, Mr. Speaker, together with activation of the judiciary fund that will ensure that Kenyans have access to justice. We are able to build at least a high court in each of our 47 counties, and citizens can access justice without much hindrance, Mr. Speaker. That is something very important, and for which I am proud to report about. Of course, he moved on to agriculture, Mr. Speaker, which is on many occasions we've been reminded that this is the backbone of our economy. But unfortunately, we don't treat it as so. Mr. Speaker, so long as we continue to rely on rain-fed agriculture, by the bulk, 80 to 90% of our farmers, if we don't incentivize them and ensure that they're able to access markets, that they're able to access farm inputs at a cheaper price, Mr. Speaker, then we shall never be food secure as a country, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the commitment that has been given by the President in his speech, that part of the first acts as well that he has done, and he reports in this speech, Mr. Speaker, is to bring down the cost of fertilizer from 6,500 to 3,500 for a 50 kg bag. I want to challenge our colleagues, Mr. Speaker. Those of you that will have the opportunity to work in the Agriculture Committee, please hold the executive to the account. Ensure that this cheap subsidized fertilizer is available across the country. In fact, push the Ministry of Agriculture, because agriculture is largely a devolved function. There is absolutely no reason why the national government shouldn't partner with our county governments to ensure that there is proper distribution, so that we don't have cartels at the ministry. You know, where people, if you know somebody who knows another person, you're able to pay them and you access this cheap fertilizer, store it in your hardware and sell it to farmers. That has been the story of our subsidy programs as a country, Mr. Speaker. I believe that, colleagues, those of you that will serve at the Agriculture Committee, please push the Ministry of Agriculture to partner with our county government so that our farmers can access the right fertilizer at the right amount at the right time, so that they are able to produce cheaply. And of course, push county governments as well to work together with the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Cooperatives, because we need to ensure, Mr. Speaker, that our farmers get value for their practice. Because the two main challenges for those of us that had the opportunity to move around and listen to our farmers during the campaigns. Of course, they cried about the cost of farm inputs, and second, immediately after that, is markets. Markets for their goods, Mr. Speaker, where they are able to sell at a good price without feeling that they are being exploited. A good aggregator for all our products, Mr. Speaker, will enable our farmers enjoy the fruits of their labor. Otherwise, as is the practice right now, if we allow it to move as is without the kind of the policies that are being proposed in this particular speech, Mr. Speaker, you will continue with the trend where the ordinary farmer is not the beneficiary of their practice. We must have a discussion as a country, Mr. Speaker, about value addition. We cannot continue to be, for example, in the tea sector, and there are 14 of you in this House, senators, that are representative of tea farmers. We cannot continue to be the world's leading producer of the best black tea, yet we are only bulk selling. We must have a discussion about value addition so that in the next 5 years, we are value adding our tea in excess of 50%. Right now, we are doing only 5% of that. Our farmers will never enjoy the fruit of their labor, so long as we are just plucking, shredding it in factories, packing it in containers and selling it off in the Mombasa auction. You must be able to have a ready market for value-added tea, the final product, fetching for upwards of $5, you know, a kg, as opposed to what is being sold right now at a shilling or two, a dollar or two, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, those are the policies that are being produced in this particular speech, Mr. Speaker. I thought I had additional time, but maybe, did I exhaust? I think you did not hold my time, actually. I can seek leave of you to conclude in the next 3 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes, Mr. Speaker. 3, okay, yeah, because I know many of my colleagues want to speak. I'll conclude my speaker by saying this is a good speech. 2 or 3 things that I want to highlight. Affordable credit, something that was mentioned broadly by Kenyans. You know how much each of you right now, if you are to call your domestic workers back in the village and say, I want to send you to a particular shop, can I send you money? The first thing they'll tell you, please don't send it on this particular line. That one has a Fuliza, or this one has an Mshwari, and the likes of things. Affordable credit is a big challenge to the ordinary citizens of this country. I want to be happy that he reported on this speech, and I saw it, Mr. Speaker, that at least one of the most popular avenues for mobile borrowing, that is Fuliza, Mr. Speaker, has reduced their rates by 40%. That is not enough. I still find the charges that they are pushing to be a bit extremely high, Mr. Speaker. And I look forward to our colleagues in the Finance Committee demanding of them that let it be as competitive as what is offered in other jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker. Finally, is the issue of health that I want to conclude on. Mr. Speaker, the President dwelt a lot on his plan on universal health care. We've had this discussion. If there is something for which this Senate must stand to be counted, Mr. Speaker, and colleagues who have been here before know the journey that we have walked in trying to push UHC. You remember the phase that was launched, the trial phase that was launched in 4 counties last time, Mr. Speaker. With so much challenges, county governments reporting very little progress in terms of penetration and access to affordable health care. Then this House of the Senate must hold the executive and partner with it, pass the necessary legislation for reforms in the NHIF, pass additional resources to our county governments in terms of user forgone fees, so that we ensure ordinary citizens are able to access primary health care at a fee that is affordable to the ordinary citizen. That is properly exposed. I look forward to colleagues who will be nominated to serve in the Health Committee, partnering with the executive, because as we oversight them, we are also partners with them. If there are legislative interventions that they want from us, let us be done with it as quick as possible, so that all the 47 to 50 million Kenyans that live in this country are able to access healthcare cheaply and at the right time, get the right intervention, and nobody has to sell off their land, sell off their property because they have had the unfortunate occurrence of being sick, Mr. Speaker. That is the kind of country that I look forward to living in, and I challenge our colleagues. Of course, I'm sure as the rest of my colleagues continue to speak and raise issues, they'll speak about many things, including KRA, the kind of reforms that are needed, which were exposed by the President. So, Mr. Speaker, that is the speech of the President. I beg to move, Mr. Speaker, and request my colleague, Senator Boni Halwale, the Senator for Kakamega, to second. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Majority Whip, Senator Boni Karware.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion that the speech of His Excellency, the President of the Republic of Kenya, which he delivered at the joint sitting of this House, be appreciated, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I do this, I think it is very important that I be understood by Kenyans who are following this debate on why I used very strong language on a state council during my point of order, Mr. Speaker. A senior council. Sorry, senior council. Senior council. Omugeni omukoyone. Omukoyone. Senior council. Mr. Speaker, because this is a house of record, I want it to be eternally clear that the President was very clear in his mind, and he has repeatedly said so, that unless we tweak the standing orders, we will not be able to extract maximum benefit from cabinet secretaries appearing before the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is a problem we had in the second Senate, where Senator Madaya and I had the privilege to sit, because what goes on is actually a joke, whereby a chair of a committee purports to respond to issues raised either in the Senate or in the National Assembly on behalf of the executive. My brother, Senator Mukani, Senior Counsel, I agree with you that a committee of this House can quickly transform itself into a committee of the whole, and the minister will come. But please, let it be clearer further to you that when he does so, the mess